Welcome back to Historical Secrets, where we open the door of time to look straight at the things that books often overlook. Tonight, I want you to imagine a moment. No hospitals, no painkillers, no doctors on call, only flickering candlelight, the smell of herbs, and the screams of pain echoing through the wooden house. That is the moment a medieval woman is fighting, not an enemy, but life and death itself, to bring a new life into the world. These mothers didn't just give birth. They challenged death every time they went into labor. They had no modern medical knowledge, only faith, oral experience, and midwives who were both saviors and keepers of hundreds of untold secrets. So if you think giving birth today is a miracle, stay with me until the end of this video, where you will see why childbirth in the Middle Ages was one of the most incredible and agonizing journeys in human history. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the stories that truly make us grateful to be living in the modern age. Imagine you are a woman living in the 13th century. When your belly begins to swell, you are not just carrying a new life, you are bearing the judgment, beliefs, and fears of the entire community. In those times, pregnancy was not merely a personal matter, it was a religious event, a moral test, and sometimes entertainment for the whole village. Every bout of nausea, every contraction, every strange dream was seen as a sign from God or the devil. If you gave birth to a boy, people would say you were blessed by God. If it was a girl, they would whisper that perhaps you had eaten too many vegetables. Yes, vegetables. Because it was believed that vegetables growing close to the ground made the fetus weak and feminine. In that context, medical advice did not come from doctors, as most women would never meet a real physician in their lifetime. Instead, they turned to midwives, who held knowledge not written in books, but passed down through generations by experience, faith, and tales that were half true, half myth. The midwife was the center of the entire medieval reproductive system, a field doctor in simple clothing, with a bag of herbs instead of a stethoscope and prayers instead of anesthesia. She not only assisted in childbirth, but also held the village's secrets, witnessing both life and death. The midwife knew who was pregnant out of wedlock, who had performed abortions with mugwort roots, and who had lost a child in the shadows. All her knowledge was forged from experience and pain, what modern medicine today calls survival experimentation. Yet even the most skilled midwife could not defy what was then called God's will. No antibiotics, no understanding of bacteria, and most of what was considered medicine relied on four things: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, the four humors believed to govern all emotions and illnesses. During pregnancy, it was thought that a woman's body was out of balance, and the midwife's task was to restore harmony. How? By scraping the skin, burning herbs, wearing charms, or even placing a piece of animal hide under the bed to draw away evil energy. More terrifyingly, if a birth went wrong, people feared not only the loss of mother or child, but the loss of the soul. A prolonged contraction was seen as a sign of the devil hiding in the womb. A stillborn child could be considered a child of the devil, and its body was buried hastily outside the cemetery, with no rites, no prayers. Women who survived difficult births were sometimes suspected of practicing magic. Their survival became evidence that they were protected by some force, rather than by physical strength or luck. The irony was that, while medieval men were celebrated as warriors for killing in battle, women were anonymous warriors fighting to create life. No armor, no glory, only blood, tears, and prayers. In the moment of labor, a woman was no longer an individual but a symbol of sacrifice. She was advised to remain silent, endure patiently, and accept pain as part of her divine duty. Every cry was seen as a lack of faith. Amid all of this was absolute loneliness. Childbirth was a solitary ritual. Men were forbidden from entering the birthing room. The husband, whether loving or indifferent, could only wait outside, listening to the groans and cries echo through thick walls. Meanwhile, inside, the midwife whispered prayers, burned herbs, and guided the mother's breathing, not to relieve pain, but to keep the soul tethered to the body. These strange rituals, though seemingly superstitious, stemmed from something deeply human: fear. Fear of losing the mother, fear of losing the child, fear of the uncontrollable. And it was this fear that created an entire treasure trove of folk knowledge, from brewing herbal teas to hanging protective charms. Every lavender blossom hung from the beams, every red string tied around a wrist carried the small hope that everything will be all right. But things were not always all right. The mortality rate during childbirth in the Middle Ages was terrifyingly high. In some places, 1 in 3 women did not survive childbirth. No anesthetics, no sterilization, and if the umbilical cord became infected, all the midwife could do was pray. Yet in the long night, amidst trembling prayers, there was still a moment of light, the first cry of the newborn. That sound was a confirmation that miracles still existed, that the mother had triumphed over death. And so, in the damp, dark room, amidst the smell of blood, smoke, and herbs, everyone wept together. Not just for the child, but for all those who were no longer there to witness it. New life was a gift, but also a reminder that every birth was a gamble. In an age when medicine was only a series of trial and error, life was never guaranteed, and thus it became more sacred than ever. The first scream tore through the room like a shattered prayer. Agnes, the midwife, remained unshaken. She lowered her gaze, placed her hand on your belly, and nodded like a general who had spotted reinforcements. "Push," she said, her voice not loud but resounding like a command from God. The women around stopped chanting. The air was so thick you could cut it with the umbilical knife Agnes held. The pain surged, no longer in waves, but as a violent tide swallowing your entire world. Sweat ran down your neck, along your chin, mixing with tears. The room reeked of wax, burning herbs, blood, and fear. Somewhere, someone whispered a plea to St. Margaret, and you silently hoped she was listening. The next contraction made you forget all lectures on the dignity of women. You screamed, not a prayer, not a human voice, but the primal sound of life striving to escape your body. Agnes did not flinch, only said, "Good, a little more. Don't falter. Your child is seeking the light." But where was the light? The windows were covered, candles flickered, and the world shrank to your ragged breaths and the creak of the wooden chair. Everything felt distorted, time stretched and contracted. For a moment, you saw clearly the face of each person. The woman knitting, hands trembling but determined, the one holding a bunch of vervain up in supplication, and Agnes, her face shadowed, but eyes bright as blades in the candlelight. Then another scream, then silence. 1 second, 2, 3, as long as a lifetime. You thought you were dead. Then the cry burst forth, small, fragile, yet resonant like a bell from a distant church. Agnes smiled, saying nothing, only raising the child high. The baby, red, sticky with blood, still halfway in the other world, was now officially a new inhabitant of the Middle Ages. One woman wept. Another laughed. You could do nothing but pant and watch. No doctor welcomed the child, no sterile white cloths, only a linen cloth washed with ash and prayers. Agnes wrapped the baby, cut the umbilical cord with the knife she had used for decades. No one knew what else it had been used for, and frankly, no one dared ask. She placed the child on your chest, hot, damp skin pressing together. For a moment, the world stopped spinning. No pain, no blood, no hymns, only that fragile breath rising amid chaos. But the moment did not last. There was work to be done. Agnes quickly began the cleanup, a modest term for overseeing the second phase of the battle, the placenta. No one had warned you that the body still fought even after the child was born. The midwife used hands, herbs, and perhaps even a touch of magic to help the body finish the task. You groaned. Agnes only said, "This is the easiest part. Trust me." You did not, but you had no strength to argue. Outside, cheers erupted as someone declared, "Mother and child are safe." Men raised mugs of beer, patted each other's backs, unaware that inside, blood still flowed, and Agnes used both hands to keep you in this world. She signaled a young girl to bring more cloth, then whispered something that sounded like a prayer, but may have been merely a checklist. The midwife did not believe in miracles. She believed in routine. Finally, she nodded. It was done. She washed her hands in a red-stained basin, then gently touched your cheek. "You are still here. Good." That was the highest praise a woman could receive in childbirth. You smiled weakly, not out of joy, but because you were alive to smile. Then came a strange quiet. People began to leave as if the storm had passed. The midwife left you with your child, advising, "Keep warm and no herring for 3 days." You did not understand why, but you would obey. In the darkness, you looked at the baby, wrinkled skin, eyes tightly shut, and saw in it faith, fear, and the future. Medieval childbirth was not just a physical journey, it was a ritual, a silent vow between the woman and the universe. I have endured, and therefore I am permitted to live. In the corner, Agnes packed up her tools. She rehung the bundles of herbs, cleaned the knives, and sighed. Another day passed, another child was born. Tomorrow, she would go again, hear the screams, pray, and deliver another tiny soul amid a world of blood and myth. And you, the new mother, would spend the coming days with aching back, leaking milk, and conflicting advice from everyone. Some would say you should sleep with the baby to ward off evil spirits. Others would insist the opposite, claiming it would cause the child to be suffocated by darkness. You no longer knew what to believe, but you believed in one thing. You had done it. In a world where women were considered property, you had created something even kings must bow to: life. Outside, the church bells rang. Wulfik, the husband who had trembled through the birth, knelt in thanks, perhaps receiving congratulations for his effort. And you, lying still, staring at the smoke-stained ceiling, listening to the faint breathing of your child, understood that no other miracle was needed. In that moment, you yourself were the miracle. Do you think that after surviving the hell of childbirth, you deserve to rest? Think again. In the Middle Ages, surviving birth was not the end. It was merely the opening act of a sacred and strange cycle called purification. From the moment the baby cried, you had entered a new game where every action, every drop of blood, even every breath was monitored by religion, superstition, and the judgment of the community. For 40 days postpartum, you were considered spiritually unclean, forbidden from entering the church, touching sacred objects, and sometimes even sitting at the family table. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't because they hated you. It was just that, according to the doctrine of the time, childbirth blood was seen as sinful matter, something that needed to be purified before your soul could return to purity. And that cleansing ritual was not always gentle. When your body still bled and your hands trembled, a priest would come to the house, or you had to drag yourself to the church to restore your purity. You knelt while everyone watched and listened to the priest recite the prayer. May God cleanse the impurity of the body and restore the purity of the soul. No one mentioned the pain, or that you had just fought death to bring a new life into the world. That was taken for granted. You were born to endure, and religion ensured that you would never forget it. But the cruelty of the era did not stop at rituals. In the weeks after birth, you still had to return to work almost immediately. If you were a peasant, you milked sheep, cleaned manure, spread straw. If you lived in a town, you washed clothes for hire or sold goods in the market, with the newborn wrapped in cloth and strapped to your back. And if you were a noblewoman, you might be luckier, but only slightly. You still had to fulfill the duty of a good wife, producing another heir as soon as possible. And if, by chance, you felt empty, sad, or simply unable to bond with your newborn, sorry, no one called it postpartum depression. They said you were possessed, unblessed, or dragged by the devil. The remedy? Prayer, sprinkling holy water, or worse, tying you up and reciting prayers until you fainted. Some records mention women being taken to small chapels, forced to fast to purify the soul, while in reality they were so exhausted they could not stand. Yet amidst that darkness there was also light. In many villages, midwives and other mothers formed a small community, caring for one another in simple ways, brewing herbal water, placing warm seed bags on the belly, whispering stories of guardian saints of mothers, St. Margaret, St. Anne, or the Virgin Mary. For them, it was not just healing, it was solidarity, and sometimes the only real magic. Then, when the 40 days passed, the return to church ritual took place. You wore your best clothes, carried the baby on your hip, walking along the muddy dirt road. People congratulated you, patted your shoulder, saying, "She has been purified." But in their eyes was still a hint of fear, a hint of distance, as if you had just returned from the dead, and in truth, you had. When the priest sprinkled holy water on your forehead, you shivered, not from the water, but from realizing you had narrowly escaped the scythe of death. And the baby, the center of all blessings and hopes, was not safe for long either. The Middle Ages were a time when infant mortality could reach 30 to 40%. A cold, a small scrape, or a slight fever could take a life. So the midwife or your mother would quickly attach amulets made of silver, fish bones, or strings braided from the mother's hair, not for decoration but to trick the devil. For it was believed that a newly born soul was fragile and tasty to dark forces. Yet life went on, and that in itself was the miracle. Medieval women, without painkillers, hospitals, or science, gave birth, raised children, and kept humanity alive. They endured isolation, fear, harsh religious rituals, yet still sang lullabies, laughed, and taught their children their first prayers. Somehow they transformed pain into legacy and turned childbirth, a storm of blood, tears, and faith, into a symbol of strength. If you've watched this far, remember, childbirth in the Middle Ages was not just a story of suffering. It was a silent epic where every mother was a warrior and every baby's cry was a victory over death. Subscribe to the channel to continue exploring other astonishing hidden corners of history, stories where faith, fear, and courage intersect, and where women, though bound by prejudice, became the protectors of life itself. If you think that giving birth is the hardest part, welcome to the next level of the survival game, keeping the child alive. In the Middle Ages, this was no different from playing a guessing game with death, except you never got a break between rounds. From the very first day, your child was seen as a gift from God, but also a challenge sent by God. You could not let it die, for that would be considered a moral failure. Yet there was little you could do beyond praying, that because medicine at the time had the same odds of success as throwing a stone at a dragon and hoping it ran away. Newborns were often swaddled so tightly they looked like crying loaves of bread. It was believed this helped their bodies develop straight and proper, and if the baby's limbs became crooked from improper swaddling, it was your fault. A moral fault, not just a technical error. Coarse cloths, pieces of leather, even thorny twine were used to bind the baby like a package in transit. And you, with a body fresh from a survival battle, had to hold, rock, and breastfeed the child amidst the cold and damp smell of the clay house. Breastfeeding was not just a natural act, it was a religious and social duty. The church believed that mother's milk symbolized mercy, the stream of the Virgin Mary flowing through every woman. But at the same time, if you lost your milk, you were seen as cursed, as one turned away by God. No one asked if you were malnourished, bleeding, or exhausted. No, they only asked, have you prayed to Saint Agatha, the patron saint of women who lost their milk, famously because her breasts had been cut off? For noble women, the situation was different. They could hire wet nurses, women who had just given birth and had abundant milk, sometimes even bringing their own children. But these arrangements were rarely simple. Behind the silk curtains and prayers lay a relationship full of tension and hypocrisy. The biological mother was praised as pure, while the actual nurse was considered lowly, almost dirty. And when the child grew, who truly bonded with it? The one who gave birth or the one who fed it? For peasant, there were no choices. You nursed your child regardless of time or pain. When milk flowed, it soaked through your cloth bodice, and no one saw that as shameful. It was life, proof that you were still useful to the world. But if the milk dried up, you had to find another way. Some tried goat's milk, cow's milk, sheep's milk, or crushed grains mixed with water and honey. There was no concept of sterilization, and so sometimes the first meal itself became a death sentence. Then came the early years, where survival became a full-time job. Every cough was a warning bell. Every fever could be a sign of disease. You slept half awake, always ready to spring up to make sure the child was still breathing. No pediatrician, no antibiotics, only herbs, prayers, and centuries of passed down experience. The midwife told you to place the baby on a warm bed of ashes to cure a cough. The priest said sprinkle holy water on the pillow. And you just wanted to keep your child alive through the winter. Loss was part of life, cruel but real. A medieval mother could bury 3, 4, even 5 children and still continue working, cooking, praying. No one wrote poems about that pain. No lullabies mentioned the lost children. Yet they still sang, because if they stopped, the world would collapse. Then, when the child survived the first 5 years, what midwives called the first miracle of life, a joy mingled with fear arose again. You began teaching the child to walk, to speak, and also began teaching them the frightening rules. Don't play near the well, don't eat unwashed bread, don't go outside when you hear funeral bells, because souls are passing by. Everything, from sleeping to eating, was bound by religious or superstitious rules. Your world was small, but heavy with belief. As your child grew, you prepared for the next pregnancy. Not because you wanted to, but because it was expected. Society did not see you as an individual, but as part of the reproductive machine sustaining the population. Every woman was a small factory, and a defective product, miscarriage, infertility, or a daughter instead of a son, was seen as a personal failure. And so you entered the cycle again, praying for the child's health, praying for milk to come, praying not to die from postpartum fever, praying that the older child did not catch disease, praying that the priest did not look at you with pity for being pregnant again. Each prayer was a fragile thread keeping you between life and death. Yet, amidst all the tragedy, one thing remained radiant: maternal love. Though considered unclean, worldly, or God's tool, a mother still loved her child with a quiet and fierce devotion. They had no words for women's rights, no knowledge of hormones or mental health, but they understood better than anyone that giving birth and raising a child was the bravest act a human could undertake. You can see them in every old record: the peasant woman holding her child in the wheat fields, the wet nurse singing in a cold castle, the mother kneeling by a small grave. No one remembers their names, yet the world exists because of them. Every breath we take today is an echo of millions of women like them, those who turned pain into life and life into history. So when thinking about childbirth in the Middle Ages, don't just think of blood and fear. Think of the anonymous mothers who faced gods, society, and death itself, just to bring the first cry of life to humanity. They did not just give birth to humans, they gave birth to civilization. Imagine living in the 14th century, where every newborn cry was not just a joy, but also a game of chance between life and death. In a world without antibiotics, anesthesia, or the concept of sterility, childbirth was a ritual soaked in sweat, blood, and faith. And at the center of it all was the birthing room, a space filled with the scent of herbs, burning candles, and desperate prayers. The midwife held the lives of two people in her hands, but don't imagine white-clad nurses or shiny metal instruments. Medieval midwives were experienced women with calloused hands, sharp eyes, and memories preserving hundreds of births. No schools, no textbooks, only experience and oral teachings passed down from generation to generation. Many were believed to have God-given gifts, while others were suspected of witchcraft if the baby did not survive. A single mistake, a postpartum fever, or even a tear not properly treated, could turn a savior into someone cursed. And in the dark little houses where thatched roofs leaked and the light was barely enough to see the trembling hands of the mother, the birthing ritual became part of religious belief. People believed that God decided who lived and who died, yet charms, crosses, or consecrated pieces of cloth were still hung around the bed as a barrier between life and the spirit world. In some places, windows were opened wide so that the baby's soul could find its way to the world more easily. But not everything was sacred. The truth was that difficult births were often horrifying scenes. No painkillers except alcohol, herbs, or prayers. No concept of anesthesia, so the mother's screams often lasted all night, echoing through the village. And when the baby did not turn correctly or the umbilical cord wrapped around the neck, all one could do was hope and wait for a miracle. In many cases, the midwife had to choose between mother and child, a decision no one wanted to make, but all too familiar to women of that era. When the baby finally arrived, no cry rang out louder, both a joy, a thanksgiving, and a sigh of relief after a nightmare. But birth was only the beginning. In the following days, both mother and child could die from postpartum fever or infection, what people called the devil's hand. Priests were often summoned to bless the baby immediately in case it did not survive the night. Baptism became a race against time, a ritual to save the soul before the body weakened. Among the nobility, childbirth was no less dangerous, only different in that they had silk curtains, maids, and physicians trained in Latin books, but those books were often dangerously wrong. Some doctors of the time believed that labor pain was due to female weakness and that women needed to endure it to cleanse Eve's sin. Medical advice could horrify modern readers, from tying the mother's hands so she would not disrupt God's plan, to instructing the husband to read the Bible beside her to keep both calm. Yet amid that suffering, there was one undeniable sacred thing: resilience. Every medieval mother was a warrior. No armor, no sword, only inner strength and an instinctive love for that tiny life. They knew that every birth was a confrontation with death and still willingly faced it again and again. The surrounding community also played an important role. When the first cry rang out, neighbors would arrive, bringing bread, mead, and unsolicited advice. Do not eat eel in the first month. Avoid looking at the new moon, it will spoil the milk. Keep the baby away from black cats. In a world that did not understand bacteria, superstitions were folk science, and sometimes they actually saved lives. The Middle Ages were also a time of strong belief in demonic intervention in every event. A child dying young was sometimes not seen as a victim of illness, but as a child taken by the devil. Therefore, mothers often hung charms, bathed the child in holy water, or placed garlic in the cradle to ward off evil spirits. Love and fear intertwined into a fierce faith that anything was worth doing as long as it kept the child alive. Yet, there was a moment when all theory and superstition vanished, when the mother saw her child for the first time. Amid mud, blood, and sweat, a gentle light entered, a tiny heartbeat, a fragile breath, yet enough to illuminate the dark room. Though the outside world was full of war, disease, and poverty, that moment remained humanity's purest miracle. And perhaps it is thanks to these women, those who gave birth, lost, loved, and fought in silence, that the world continues to exist. Each generation is the result of a chain of miracles paid for with blood and courage. So, when we speak of childbirth in the Middle Ages, do not only think of suffering, think of perseverance, of the faint light in the darkness. For every newborn cry of that era, however fragile, was a victory over death. And if you are still here, still following this journey with me, hit like and subscribe because there are many more stories like this. Stories of courage, of miracles, and of how humans persevered through the darkest periods of history. However, behind the colorful silk parasols and glasses of wine by the seaside lay a different world, just a few streets away, where the working class crowded into noisy boarding houses with cramped bunk beds and the smell of fried fish wafting through the halls. They came here not to flaunt wealth or recuperate, but to temporarily escape the factory grind, where every machine whistle reminded them of a life with no time to breathe. The laborers, shoemakers, weavers, and coal porters, along with their families, carried hopes of a day of freedom, just one day to walk barefoot on the sand and let their children laugh without being scolded for laziness. They were the true soul of the Victorian seaside holiday. They didn't need gilded tea rooms nor string orchestras. A blanket spread on the sand, a few slices of bread, a cheap bottle of beer, and an ice cream were enough to create memories. The beach, for them, was the first ticket to simple happiness, something a whole year of labor could not provide. Yet, class differences never completely disappeared. As middle-class gentlemen strolled along the pier in their polished suits, working-class families struggled to find a spot on the beach, among worn wooden benches and the shouts of sunstruck children. While the wealthy hired private carriages to reach the docks, the working class had to share overcrowded trains where body heat and the smell of coal mingled. But amid that chaos, something profound emerged: the feeling that the sea belonged to everyone. The beach became one of the few places in England where classes could mingle, even if only briefly. A lady could walk past a weaver laughing heartily with her children. A middle-class young woman could smile at a young soldier splashing his friends, and no one would consider it wrong. Here, the sea breeze and the sound of waves seemed to wash away all boundaries, leaving only human joy. For women, the beach carried an even deeper meaning. In a world where Victorian norms bound them in layers of corsets and prejudice, the beach offered a rare taste of freedom. They could sit on the sand, letting the wind lift a few strands of hair without being considered improper. They could laugh loudly, speak freely, and even, inconceivable for a London lady, dip their feet in the water. The bulky bathing costumes which seemed to bind them became an excuse to escape the solemn roles of daily life. From Brighton to Blackpool, these resorts also reflected a larger cultural shift: England's transformation from a dry industrial society to one that knew how to enjoy itself. Newspapers of the time were full of advertisements for health restoring holidays, sea view rooms, and evening concerts on the pier. Those who had lived their entire lives amid coal smoke could now breathe the salty air and feel as if they had touched heaven. Even local authorities began to see the economic value of pleasure. A whole new tourism industry emerged, from postcard stalls, photographers capturing memories at Blackpool, to small souvenir makers. A new consumer culture formed around a simple idea. Happiness could be bought with a few coins, a train ticket, an ice cream, or a photograph by the sea. At the center of this boom were symbols full of contrast: bathing machines, piers, and Blackpool Tower. One represented absurd modesty, the other overwhelming extravagance. Yet both told the same story of a society struggling to reconcile morality with the desire for enjoyment, propriety with pleasure. Victorians could revere decorum, but they also longed to have fun. It was also on these beaches that cultural boundaries began to blur. Street pop music and brass bands replaced church hymns. Variety performances brought laughter to both workers and gentlemen alike. And in the hazy sunlight of sunset, when everyone sang along to a cheap tune, England for the first time felt like a true community. Different classes, different origins, but sharing the same joy. That is the true legacy of the Victorian seaside. Not just a place of leisure, but a way for England to relearn how to breathe, how to laugh, and how to enjoy life after centuries of strictness and discipline. The sea was no longer just a place for healing or a symbol of status. It became part of the national identity, a cultural ritual. Every train whistle, every wave crashing on the pier served as a reminder that simple joy could exist, even in a world full of smoke and obligation. And perhaps in the laughter echoing amid waves and wind, people found what generations before had always longed for: a moment of true freedom. No title, no wealth, just bare feet on the sand, a melting ice cream, and the vast sea before them. For in the end, no one can claim exclusive ownership of joy. The sea, like Victorian England itself, became communal, both chaotic and beautiful, and deeply human. For the Apache, health is not merely the absence of disease. It is a state of harmony where body, mind, and spirit all resonate with the rhythm of the earth. They believe that humans are not separate from nature, but are part of the vast body of Mother Earth. A wind blowing through the pines, a stream changing its course, or the first thunder of the season, all can be whispers from the world, reminding that balance is shifting. When an Apache falls ill, the first question is not how can it be cured, but what in life has lost its harmony. In their philosophy, all illness has moral and spiritual origins. A hunter who kills a deer without thanking its spirit may find his legs weakened on the next journey. A child who does not respect their parents might suffer a prolonged fever as a warning. And if a community ceases to care for the land around them, cutting trees recklessly, drying up streams, or forgetting ancient rituals, it is not just one person, but the entire tribe that suffers the consequences. For the Apache, nature does not punish. It simply reflects what humans have done. Healers or medicine men are not just doctors. They are storytellers, spiritual guides, and keepers of the community's rhythm with the world. They do not heal with medicine, but through rituals, songs, images, and symbols. A healing session can last hours, even days. Amid the echoing drums and the scent of burning herbs, the patient is led into a meditative state where they can see the root of the imbalance: a forgotten dream, an unatoned mistake, or simply a fear left unspoken. One of the most famous rituals is the chantway, literally the way of the song. It comprises hundreds of songs, dances, and symbols arranged like a spiritual map. Each song is a step guiding the patient back to harmony. The medicine man does not only sing for the patient's body, but to call benevolent spirits so that mountains and rivers hear and the wind carries the prayers far. When the ritual ends, not only does the patient feel different, but the entire village changes. The air feels lighter, laughter rings out, and everyone senses that the world has been slightly mended. The Apache believe that language has healing power. Every word, if spoken sincerely, carries energy. A prayer is not merely a poem, it is an action. When a medicine man recounts the stories of ancestors or sings about a protective spirit, they are recreating the world through sound. Therefore, false or deceitful words can cause illness, while true and beautiful words can strengthen the body. This makes their rituals highly subtle. Not everyone can sing, and not every song is permitted to be sung. In Apache legends, one idea runs through: imbalance is a warning, not a sentence. It reminds you that you have strayed too far from the right path, and that right path is not a rigid law, but a deep sense of harmony with everything around, from friends, animals, to distant mountains. When a person is healed, they are not only healthier, but also placed back into their position within the web of life. This concept may seem foreign to modern medicine, yet it shares many similarities with what science is discovering today. Modern research on holistic health shows that mental, emotional, and environmental factors significantly affect human recovery. The Apache understood this thousands of years ago, only expressed in the language of spirit and myth rather than hormones and cells. Another important aspect of the Apache view of healing is the relationship with community. A lonely person, separated from family and tribe, is almost incapable of being well. They believe isolation is the most dangerous illness, for it cuts off the flow of energy between people, regarded as the veins of the soul. When someone is ill, the entire village participates in the ritual. People sing, pray, and share their stories. No one stands outside. In this way, the patient is reminded that they still belong to something greater than themselves. This explains why the concept of health in Apache culture is always collective, not individual. No one can be healthy in a sick world. If the forest dies, if the river dries up, if people stop respecting each other, all healing efforts are temporary. Therefore, when a medicine man heals someone, he is also helping the earth regain its balance. And perhaps therein lies a timeless message. True health is not something we possess, but something we maintain together with the world. While the Victorians found healing through seaside trips and fresh air, the Apache found it in singing to mountains, praying to stars, and keeping their hearts aligned with the land and sky. Two different paths, yet both aiming at one thing: the longing for harmony, a longing that still echoes to this day. In the Apache worldview, healing is never a simple or instantaneous act. Every method, whether herbs, chanting, sand painting, or ritual, carries a deeper purpose: to restore the broken connections between the individual, the community, and nature. Health is not solely the property of one individual, but belongs to the entire community and the vast universe of which humans are only a small part. That is why every healing act is performed with absolute respect and care, for even a small mistake can diminish its effectiveness or cause unforeseen consequences. The Apache medicine man or healer is not merely a doctor. They are spiritual guides, advisors, storytellers, and protectors of the community. This role is not simply a job, but a mission passed down through generations. From the moment a student is chosen, training is rigorous and lasts many years, including memorizing sacred chants, learning complex rituals, and gaining deep understanding of herbs and their spiritual significance. Sometimes the calling to become a medicine man is foretold through dreams or near-death experiences, when the person seems to have touched the invisible world and returned with precious knowledge. From that moment, their entire life is dedicated to maintaining balance and healing the community. In every healing ritual, each gesture, word, and symbol carries its own power. The Apache believe that the universe's energy can be awakened or lost depending on the precision and sincerity of the healer's actions. They do not rely on miracles in the Western sense, but draw upon tradition and spiritual knowledge combined with material elements: herbs, minerals, instruments, and ritual objects. A complete ritual may last hours or even days, following rhythms that reflect the cycles of nature: sunrise, full moon, flowing river. Herbs play a central role in Apache medicine, but they are not merely medicines. Each plant is considered a living being with its own spirit. Sage is used to cleanse the spirit and body, juniper berries to treat stomach ailments and ward off evil, while yucca serves both daily practical purposes and medicinal use. Harvesting herbs is itself a ritual. The time of day, the phase of the moon, and the location are all considered to optimize healing energy. After harvesting, herbs are often combined with prayers, songs, and rituals, ensuring that their healing effects impact both body and spirit. Small offerings, a pinch of cornmeal, a silent word of thanks, or a tiny object left at the harvest site, demonstrate respect and harmony between humans and nature. Not only herbs, but words and music are also powerful remedies. Chants, hymns, and prayers are viewed as bridges between the human realm and the spiritual world, carrying energy to restore balance. A chant may last only a few minutes or extend through complex rituals involving the entire community. The sounds of birds, wind, and drums merge with the human heartbeat, creating a healing environment not only for the patient but for everyone nearby. When the community joins in singing, the belief that they are not alone in the struggle against illness is reinforced, multiplying the ritual's power. A distinctive aspect of Apache healing is that it is always connected with education and tradition. The medicine man does not merely heal, but tells the stories of ancestors, teaches how to live in harmony with nature, and passes on moral values. Major ceremonies, such as the dawn dance or rites of passage, also carry healing elements, reinforcing the connection between individuals and the community, reminding of responsibility toward nature, and affirming the meaning of life. Even in smaller rituals, from singing before a hunt to praying for warriors before battle, the aim is to maintain the great balance in the human and natural world. Crucially, the medicine man's power does not come from themselves, but from the ability to connect people with the universe and nature. Healing is not an individual act, but a community ritual in which everyone participates, supports, and strengthens belief. A herb, a chant, or a dance does not only affect the patient, but reminds the entire community of responsibility and connection with the surrounding world. It is this combination of herbs, music, rituals, and tradition that creates a sophisticated, ancient, and holistic system of healing. It is not merely medicine, but a philosophy of life, emphasizing that humans, nature, and the unseen world must remain in harmony. While modern science has recently discovered many healing compounds in herbs, for the Apache, their true value lies in the living relationship between humans, plants, and the universe, a relationship preserved through faith, ritual, and respect. And in every chant, every song, every ritual, the Apache created a complete healing environment where body, spirit, and community are all affected simultaneously. They remind us that health is not a personal possession, but part of a vast web of life. In this way, the medicine man becomes a guardian of balance, an embodiment of hope, faith, and continuity. In each ritual, healing is not merely the restoration of health, but the recreation of harmony with the universe itself, a timeless lesson, reminding us that humans cannot exist apart from nature and community. In the Apache worldview, healing is a journey that integrates body, spirit, and community, a holistic experience in which no element can be separated. Every chant, every sand painting, and every herb is not merely a tool for curing illness, but also a means to restore cosmic order, placing humans in their proper position within the vast circle of life. The Apache medicine man, with knowledge and experience passed down through generations, serves as a guide on this journey, both healer and spiritual mentor, protecting and encouraging the community to maintain harmony with nature and the spirits. Music and hymns play a central role in the healing process. The Apache believe that words shape reality. When spoken in sacred chants, they do not merely carry symbolic meaning, but also arrange the world back into order. These hymns are not magic in the sense of trickery, but are a way of organizing unseen energies to restore balance to the patient. The rhythms, melodies, and words of the chants are carefully chosen to activate healing energy while connecting the patient with the community and spiritual forces. When combined with herbs, sand paintings, and rituals, music becomes the thread linking all aspects of healing, creating a unified and vibrant whole. Sand paintings, a sacred tool in rituals, are not merely decorative art, but spiritual maps that materialize cosmic order on the ground. Made from powdered stone, pollen, charcoal, and clay, the paintings depict humans, animals, and sacred symbols representing protective and healing forces. The medicine man, together with apprentices, carefully spreads each grain to form intricate patterns, each line carrying meaning. The patient is placed at the center of the painting, becoming the focal point of balance, where spirits and healing energies converge. When the ritual is complete, the sand painting is destroyed, the sand scattered or blown away, symbolizing the impermanence of illness, reminding that sickness is not permanent and that healing energy must be returned to the universe after completing its purpose. Herbs are used alongside music and sand paintings, but are not chosen solely for their physical properties. Each plant carries its own spirit, and the process of harvesting and preparation is itself a ritual, demonstrating respect for nature. Sage cleanses body and spirit, juniper berries drive away evil, and yucca heals wounds while providing essential daily products. The preparation of herbs is often accompanied by prayers, hymns, or rituals, ensuring they affect both body and spirit. Even offering a pinch of cornmeal or a word of thanks before harvesting reflects the balance and harmony between humans and the surrounding environment. Healing rituals often last many hours or days, combining music, prayer, dance, and symbolic actions. They are not only for the patient, but involve the community. Family, friends, and tribal members participate, praying and supporting together. Illness is no longer an individual matter, but a disruption affecting the entire community, and healing becomes a shared responsibility, strengthening the bonds among people and with the natural world. Some special ceremonies, such as nighttime chants or dawn dances, serve both healing purposes and mark important milestones in spiritual and social life. From cleansing illness to blessing maturity, reproduction, or renewal, these rituals emphasize that human health is linked to natural cycles and spiritual milestones. The rhythm of drums, the colors of sand paintings, singing, and prayers create an atmosphere both mystical and hopeful, transforming the healing experience into a profound journey, reminding the patient that they are not alone in this path. Beyond individual healing, rituals reinforce the relationship between humans and nature. Mountains, rivers, plants, animals, and the wind are all considered beings with their own spirits. Eagles carry prayers to the sky, bears provide strength and endurance, and even the smallest creatures remind of adaptability and communal spirit. Healing, therefore, is not only caring for the body, but also mending the connection between humans, nature, community, and protective spirits. Offerings, from cornmeal and pollen to prayers to the four directions, symbolize harmony with all aspects of life. Apache healing emphasizes that humans are not masters of nature, but part of the larger circle of life. When balance is disturbed, illness appears, and healing becomes the act of restoring harmony, not only within the body, but also in every relationship and the surrounding environment. Through this approach, the Apache teach a profound lesson. True health does not belong to the individual, but is a state of harmony maintained through all living connections. Illness is not the fault of any one person, but a sign that balance has been disrupted, and healing becomes the responsibility of the entire community. Music, herbs, sand paintings, rituals, and communal participation work together to restore order, reestablish harmony, and remind that humans are an inseparable part of the living universe surrounding them. In the medieval worldview, the wedding night was never merely a private moment, but a significant social and legal ritual, where the body, emotions, and communal responsibilities intertwined into a complex and meaningful experience. In the eyes of people in the Middle Ages, marriage was not just a matter of personal love, but a union between families, lands, political alliances, and reputations. Therefore, the most intimate moment, the first night together, was conducted with the observation and participation of the community to ensure that the marriage contract existed not only on paper, but was reinforced through physical action. For noble families, where power, wealth, and inheritance were paramount, consummating the marriage through sexual intercourse was vivid proof of the legitimacy and validity of the alliance, preventing disputes over inheritance or social status. These rituals often began with the procession of the bride and groom to the bedroom, a performance both solemn and lively. Guests, family, and servants accompanied them, creating a procession filled with music, laughter, and playful teasing. Community participation was not merely ceremonial, but a social testament, emphasizing that this marriage was a shared responsibility affecting the reputation, alliances, and fate of many. Even in peasant families, the rituals were simpler, but retained the communal spirit. Villagers gathered outside, singing cheerful songs, beating rhythms on pots and pans, or preparing symbolic food and charms, all intended to bless and ensure the couple's success. As the couple entered the room, the next rites carried religious and legal significance. In noble families, clergy or bishops might be present, praying and blessing, emphasizing that marriage was not merely a personal act, but a sacred union before God and the community. In many cases, the presence of relatives, friends, and clergy was considered a guarantee that the act of intercourse would confirm the marriage contract. For medieval people, if the wedding night did not occur or was delayed, the marriage could be considered incomplete, and related rights such as inheritance or land ownership could be at risk. The actual ritual in the bedroom was both mythical and social, sometimes blending solemnity with humorous moments. In some noble families, servants or relatives helped undress, guided the couple, and even participated in blessings, ensuring that every detail complied with moral, religious, and customary rules. Children or attendants observed from corners of the room to learn and pass down knowledge to future generations, making these rituals an inseparable part of cultural education. Even seemingly minor details, such as placing charms, herbs, or symbolic foods near the bed, were meant to promote fertility, happiness, and marital success, reflecting the connection between the physical, spiritual, and communal worlds. In this environment, privacy was almost a luxury, and newlyweds rarely experienced the first night without others present. This supervision ensured legality while reinforcing social elements, emphasizing that marriage was a shared responsibility, not merely a private right. Music, laughter, blessings, and symbolic rituals created a supportive psychological space where the couple realized that their shared journey was not just the union of two people, but also integration into the larger circle of family, lineage, and community. Beyond legal aspects, the wedding night carried profound spiritual meaning. Through priests or bishops, the church not only witnessed but guided appropriate behavior according to morality and theology, ensuring that intercourse occurred for reproductive purposes and aligned with religious regulations. Certain holy days or times of the year forbade sexual activity, and postures or behaviors considered inappropriate were closely monitored. This emphasized that sex within marriage was not merely a physical act, but a sacred deed, connecting the individual with community, law, and God. From a modern perspective, these rituals may seem intrusive or humorous, but for the medieval period, they were essential tools to protect rights, reputation, and social order. Every action, whether humorous or solemn, contributed to strengthening family ties, confirming inheritance rights, and creating consistency between legal, religious, and social spheres. Even pranks, such as chasing the bride's shoes or stockings, carried symbolic meaning, emphasizing fertility and the continuation of lineage. Within this context, the wedding night became a community event where individual and society intersected, where power, responsibility, belief, and tradition coexisted. Newlyweds not only learned to become husband and wife, but also learned to integrate into the broader social network, maintaining the balance between personal responsibility and communal benefit. Through this ritual, medieval people emphasized a fundamental notion. Marriage was a comprehensive union, not only emotionally, but also legally, socially, and spiritually, where every member of the community played a role in protecting, witnessing, and supporting it. Thus, the wedding night was not merely the beginning of a personal relationship, but a vibrant ritual, where all elements, from legal, moral, religious, to cultural and communal, intertwined. It reminded that the balance between individual and community, between physical and spiritual, between law and ethics, was central to medieval life. And in every step, every laugh, every prayer, and every song, the wedding night became a vivid portrait of order, responsibility, and humanity, where each individual learned to harmonize with the entire network of life surrounding them. The medieval wedding night was not merely a personal event, but a vivid social and legal ritual, where power, family responsibilities, and religious beliefs intersected. Even in small rural villages, where life was simpler, the couple's first night was closely monitored by the community. Friends and neighbors gathered outside, singing while beating pots and pans, tossing grains of wheat or other cereals as symbols of fertility to bless the couple. Privacy in this period was almost a luxury. Even peeking through the window was considered a way for the community to ensure the ritual was properly carried out. In medieval thinking, marriage was not simply a matter between two people, but a public contract, and the community had full authority to guarantee its legality and validity. In noble and royal families, supervision was even stricter. Witnesses might remain to ensure that the couple was settled, and in extreme cases, provide evidence of intercourse. This was not only to protect the heirs' rights, but also to ensure that political alliances and property were preserved. While common folk did not face such intense pressure, the ritual remained equally important. Neighbors, friends, and servants participated in creating a communal atmosphere. The wedding night became a festival that was both joyful and sacred. A central focus of the wedding night was fertility, as marriage was not only a union between two people, but also a guarantee for the future of lineage and family. The entire wedding ritual revolved around creating new life, reflected in the use of fertility related foods as an indispensable part of the ceremony. Guests often scattered wheat, oats, or barley on the marriage bed, symbolizing abundance and prosperity. Bread, salt, and eggs were placed near the bed to ward off misfortune and increase the chances of conception. Honey, with its sweet stickiness, was widely consumed, symbolizing marital bliss and sweetness in family life. In addition to food, charms and herbs served as a layer of spiritual and mental protection. The bride might wear discreet amulets in her gown or jewelry. Cloves were believed to prevent infertility, while rosemary strengthened love and memory. In some households, branches of yew or sage were placed under the bed, believed to stimulate desire and fertility. These superstitions were also connected to timing and seasons. Some nights were considered luckier, while others, such as feast days or Lent, were strictly forbidden. Violating these rules was considered not only reckless, but could also result in failure to conceive, a frightening prospect in a world where lineage, labor, and survival depend on reproductive capacity. Church oversight further heightened the solemnity and sacredness of the ritual. Sexual activity within marriage was precisely guided to serve reproductive purposes, and priests ensured that all acts complied with moral rules. Personal pleasure was not encouraged, only actions appropriate to the mission of procreation were accepted. Important holy days and strict seasons, such as Lent, Advent, or major feast days, forbade sexual relations, and violations could result in spiritual punishment. Even sexual positions were controlled. The missionary position, with the man on top, was encouraged as the only acceptable posture, believed to reflect natural order, while other positions were condemned. Church manuals described in detail how couples should behave, from choosing the day and time to specific actions in bed. While it is unlikely that all couples strictly followed these rules, the Church's influence shaped attitudes and anxieties surrounding the wedding night. Confession also served as a tool for monitoring compliance. Couples who deviated from these expectations could be questioned, making even later sexual life colored by surveillance and morality. In royal and noble circles, the wedding night became legal proof. Witnesses such as servants, midwives, or trusted clergy could remain in the room until confirming that the couple had consummated. In important marriages, physical evidence, such as a bloodstained sheet, was used to prove legality, ensuring that heirs were legitimate and family alliances were reinforced. In the absence of evidence, a marriage could be annulled, political alliances broken, and the family's fate rearranged. Thus, the medieval wedding night was not merely a moment of discovering love, but a complex ritual where individuals, families, communities, and the church all participated to ensure social, legal, and religious order. From scattering grains, preparing charms, overseeing the ceremony, to educating the couple on reproductive responsibilities, every detail carried sacred and essential meaning, reflecting a world where sexuality, marriage, and power were tightly intertwined with survival, lineage, and religious faith. The medieval wedding night was a complex stage where even the smallest actions were observed and judged, from outside the room to within the bedroom. For young brides and their families, the first night was not only a personal challenge, but also a test of honor, virginity, and even political power. Among the nobility and royalty, a blood-stained sheet was not only proof of the bride's virginity, but also legal evidence determining the legitimacy of the marriage and the inheritance rights of children. A single piece of cloth could make the difference between a solid alliance and a scandal shaking the court. For peasants, the issue was less politically dramatic, but still present in the form of social pressure. A man considered impotent might face ridicule, fines, or the annulment of marriage, while the community expected to hear signs of success through laughter, noises echoing from the window, or symbolic objects displayed the next morning. The pressure on the bride's virginity was not merely a personal expectation, but also a symbol of lineage and family honor. Failure to prove virginity could tarnish personal reputation, embarrass the family, and threaten political alliances. The Church, with the model of the Virgin Mary, emphasized that purity was paramount, and the bride was expected to demonstrate this virtue even on the first night. Blood-stained sheets, simple yet legally weighty evidence, became tools to determine the legality and legitimacy of the marriage, while protecting inheritance rights and political stability. Meanwhile, men were almost entirely free from similar pressure. The groom could enter the bridal chamber with sexual experience, sometimes seen as an advantage to ensure quick procreation, illustrating the medieval double standard in which female virginity carried far greater political and social weight. This pressure was not only law or custom, but reinforced by layers of superstition and folk magic. Families feared evil spirits, misfortune, or neighborly envy interfering with the marriage, making protective rituals essential. Amulets hidden in the room, herbs like cloves, rosemary, thyme, or rue were believed not only to ward off evil, but also to remind the couple of virtues such as loyalty, fertility, and purity. Iron and fire also played important roles. Keys, iron knives, or candles lit through the night were thought to protect the couple from supernatural forces, reflecting a combination of superstition and practical responsibility. These rituals were not only preventive, but also encouraged fertility. Small charms made from bones, shells, or concoctions of honey, herbs, and sometimes animal parts were used with the belief that they helped the bride conceive more quickly. Although the church did not officially endorse these superstitions, customs were widespread across social classes, from peasants to nobility, creating a network of beliefs and control surrounding the wedding night. Guests participated by singing fertility songs, scattering grains, or placing symbolic objects around the room, blurring the lines between celebration, faith, and social pressure. All these elements created an atmosphere of tension mixed with humor. For the bride, fear of blood, pain, or meticulous inspection of the sheets made the first night a formidable trial. For the groom, the pressure to complete the task was also heavy, as failure could lead to humiliation, annulment, or even political disaster among the royalty. Among lower classes, social pressure often came with public teasing and jokes. Laughter, songs, and pranks from friends and neighbors both eased tension and emphasized that the couple's sexual life was a community matter, not solely private. Thus, the medieval wedding night existed in a strange balance between pressure and festivity, seriousness and humor, sacredness and the mundane. It was a moment to test honor, verify virginity, secure lineage, and strengthen family alliances. Every detail, from the blood-stained sheets, charms, and magical rituals to community participation, carried meaning, skillfully combining legal, political, religious, and cultural elements. While many extreme rituals gradually disappeared toward the end of the Middle Ages, the legacy of these traditions left a deep mark on European marriage culture, reminding that in a world where reproduction, honor, and power were inseparably linked, even the seemingly most private actions could become the focus of the entire community. The medieval wedding night, initially a public ritual with strict rules, gradually transformed into a more personal moment while still retaining strong traces of tradition. Among the nobility and royalty, close supervision by family and the church persisted for centuries, especially in political marriages, where the legitimacy of heirs could determine the fate of a dynasty. Royal weddings in France, England, and the Holy Roman Empire often concluded with a formal consummation ceremony, with clergy blessing and reliable witnesses ensuring that the marriage had been completed according to law and ritual. Over time, however, the need for direct observation began to diminish, giving way to symbolic gestures rather than literal monitoring. Privacy gradually became an important factor. Even kings realized that observation could become too intrusive, and allowing the couple space to complete their first night became more common. Meanwhile, villages and small towns gradually replaced the noisy traditions of the Middle Ages, such as lullabies, banging pots, or throwing grains, with gentler rituals. Joy, humor, and symbols of fertility remained, but the level of social pressure decreased significantly. Instead of inspections, neighbors and friends participated in celebratory gatherings the next day, dancing, playing games, and singing, trusting that the marriage had been fully and legally established. The church maintained its authority, but its influence gradually became more symbolic than strictly enforced. Couples were still reminded of their sacred duties, of adhering to approved times and rules, but were no longer under direct pressure to prove every action. In the early modern period, notions of personal feelings, love, and romance began to permeate the marital system. The wedding night was no longer solely a political duty or legal proof. It became a time for the couple to explore emotion and intimacy. Nevertheless, echoes of medieval rituals remained, reminding that marriage was not only the cooperation of two individuals, but also the convergence of cultural, religious, and political values. One legacy that survives to this day is the term honeymoon, evoking ancient fertility rituals involving honey, a symbol of sweetness and procreation. The custom of throwing rice at weddings, though now more symbolic, remains evidence of the old tradition wishing for fertility and prosperity. Even considering the first night as a milestone in marital life reflects the assertion of ownership, reproductive ability, and the completeness of the relationship, a notion originating in the Middle Ages, when every action was linked to social responsibility. The transition from public to private did not mean the complete removal of symbolic elements. Even as magical rituals and charms declined, fertility symbols persisted. Among noble families, items such as flowers, herbs, or symbolic foods were still prepared with the belief that they would bring luck, fertility, and prosperity. These rites both protected spiritually and reminded the couple of their moral and social responsibilities. They illustrate how medieval communities combined folk beliefs with legal and political demands, creating a complex network around marriage. Meanwhile, for brides, the pressure regarding virginity and honor remained significant, but gradually became more subtle and symbolic. It was no longer necessary to prove virginity through physical evidence or direct supervision. Instead, purity was implicitly understood and respected through refined rituals and traditions. Grooms, while still expected to demonstrate reproductive capability, received greater privacy and respect, reflecting gradual progress in attitudes towards sexuality and personal rights. These changes did not eliminate the communal aspect. On the contrary, they expanded forms of social participation. Wedding feasts, dancing, singing, and games became ways for the community to celebrate the couple's happiness without intruding on privacy. Humor, laughter, and symbolic actions continued to relieve tension, creating a space that was ceremonial, friendly, and joyful. In this way, the wedding night became a ritual balancing responsibility and emotion, ceremony and joy, reflecting changing social notions while preserving the cultural legacy of the Middle Ages. Finally, the medieval wedding night and its evolution into the early modern period vividly demonstrate how marriage has always been shaped not only by personal love, but also by surrounding social, religious, and cultural factors. Rituals, charms, fertility symbols, and even community traditions all emphasized that marriage was a comprehensive contract where fulfillment, virginity, honor, and power intertwined. Even as time passed, traces of these traditions remain, from rice throwing, honeymoon honey, to symbolic rituals in noble families. They serve as a reminder that although modern marriage focuses more on love and individual freedom, the imprints of the past remain deeply ingrained in how we perceive relationships, duties, and the symbols surrounding matrimony.